Ohio State, Penn State. This is a noon kickoff, you know, 3.5 point favorite of the Buckeyes on the road. This is brutal in terms of look, I don't understand it. Ralph has been very vocal about this. I was hesitant towards it, and now I think I'm fully on the ship. It's ridiculous that the best game that you have as a conference is right after your brunch. We got people throwing down mimosas and heading right over to the stadium for this one. Ohio State, Penn State deserves under the lights college football. It deserves everything that is glorious about that Penn State campus and that stadium and that environment. It deserves it. The fact that it's not getting it is a crime to the college football society. And if you put the right people in power, they'll make it happen. That's all I got to say. Moving on. Here we talk about kind of the first point with this game. Are playoff hopes on the line? Well, obviously yes, but found some interesting numbers with this. ESPN has come out with kind of its sponsored by Allstate. It's Allstate College Football Playoff Predictor, where you can go in and you can kind of simulate the scenarios that you'd like to see in terms of college football in general. So it has about 20 teams in the playoff. Obviously, both of these are, there. And entering this game, ESPN predicts, which if you don't think ESPN plays a factor much more than just a simulation, wake up to college football. Hello, Florida State fans. They do play a factor into the college football playoff. Penn State currently has an 84% chance coming into this game to make the college football playoff. Ohio State's percentage chance is 73%. A fun little stat that I found with this, and Ralph just joined the background. Ralph, I sent you kind of the notes for the show. It's on your email if you want to kind of play along with me here. An Ohio State win against Penn State on Saturday, the percentage shoots up big time. If they lose to Indiana next week, they still have, and then they beat Michigan. They would not play in the Big Ten title game in this scenario. If assuming Indiana wins that, it'd be Indiana and Oregon, or Penn State and Oregon, depending on what how those things work out. But Ohio State wouldn't do it because they'd have two conference losses. Ohio State's percentage per ESPN to make the playoff with two losses in conference is 75%, which is still fairly high in my opinion. Coming into this game, you're at 73. You have a 75% chance to do just that. I wanted to add this into it's not just a 75% chance to make the playoff, it's a 53% to be a host in the first round, and a 21%, obviously, there to be going on the road. So, to me, in my opinion, this is a scenario where I pose the question, are playoff hopes on the line? Well, for Ohio State, you would think yes. If you win, you continue to take care of business. If you lose, things could get finicky. They could get a little uneasy up there in Columbus, Ralph's favorite second city in the world. They could get uneasy there in Columbus, Ohio. So 75% chance if Ohio State wins this game. Now let's talk about the game in general. Here's some of the things that, I've got 3 points I want to hit on this game. And Ohio State minus 3.5 at Penn State. My player to watch in this one for Penn State is Tyler Warren, the tight end. He's been nice. He has been very effective for them. It's not explosive, but he's a guy that's been a reliable target for Drew Aller and company. You also kind of see, too, this is hinging on Drew Aller's health, which James Franklin and Penn State said they're going to probably take this down to the wire, which makes sense. It's going to force Ohio State to game plan for two different quarterbacks. Aller has raised his average depth of throw that was 8 yards last season, because remember, we always talked about Penn State didn't throw the ball down the field. It's up to 9.6 per game. Now, when you talk about that, we know Ohio State has guys, and Larry Johnson up there in Columbus has done a fantastic job with that defensive line. But if you, and you kind of, and I want to say this, when you go to Penn State and you look where they have struggled against the elite teams on their schedule, well, it's frankly just been a scenario of you can't stretch the field. There's no downfield threat. There's no ability to create any type of, you can't occupy the back of the mind of the Ohio State defense because you haven't been able to throw deep on them. Drew Aller has increased, like I just said, from average of 8 yards to up to 9.6. You say Bryce is on 1.6 yards. But when you look at the big scheme of that, that means he's hitting on some deep throws. I like Tyler Warren in this game. I think he could be a really nice piece to the puzzle for Penn State to win this football game, especially against the Ohio State linebacking core that isn't as strong as it has been. So all that to say is, what if Drew Aller doesn't play? Now that creates an entire different scenario. I got the backup. We got information here. Bo Prabula is the backup. He's more of a dual threat option for Penn State. He came in last week. He threw for just over 100 yards. He ran and he scored. But the biggest thing that he did in that game when they played Wisconsin was he didn't make mistakes. He didn't put the ball in harm's way. And it was a balanced attack. Look, you're not going to have the 5-star arm talent that you have in Drew Aller, but you're going to have a guy that understands the offense. He understands the moment. And for people saying, well, it's the backup quarterback, understood. I don't know if it's going to make a massive difference, but it's also a guy who has been at Penn State as long as Drew Aller has been. He came in the same class. So he understands the magnitude of this rivalry. He understands the magnitude of this game. And, although he hasn't probably played in this environment in terms of what it's going to be like, I know it's a home game, but just in terms of you're being QB1 for that game, it seems like from reading the press clippings that Penn State is comfortable with Prabula being the guy. So it's a different dynamic, and I think Ohio State has to enter this game really asking themselves, how do we counteract whoever they throw? And that's going to be something from the defensive side of things that I think this entire staff is going to have to take a look at, and they're going to have to understand coming into this ball game, we've got to shut them down because, and we'll flip it over here to the other side of the football. Ralph says Trace McSorley Jr. Could be. Who knows? We talk about Ohio State's defense. Okay, let's flip it over to the other side of the football because my other concern and question in this game is, can Ohio State's offensive line hold up? Penn State comes into this game 8th in the FBS in rushing defense, and they've held just two opponents. Only two opponents have gotten over 100 rushing yards on them this year. Once again, I don't care who you played. I don't care what your string schedule is. When you are dominating your opponents, like Penn State has defensively, it truly doesn't matter. I mean, they are a suffocating front seven that is going to be able to get after Will Howard and company. Now, the reason this is a cause for concern for me if I'm an Ohio State fan is because you're just coming off a performance for the Buckeyes where you held to a season-low 64 yards against Nebraska. Season-low 64 yards. Will Howard was under duress that entire game against Nebraska. Obviously, very, very brutal. But when you look and see, oh, hello there, Ralph. When you look and I'll pose it to you here. We'll just bring you right into the fire. Will Howard was under duress last week. Ohio State's not coming off a great rushing attack in terms of what they were able to do. That's my big cause of concern. We already know two of the top three tackles are going to not be available in this game for Ohio State. I don't know, man. It seems like the recipe is there for Penn State to really get after Will Howard in this Ohio State offense.
Yeah, and honestly, to me, Bryce, the biggest thing for last week is you went away from Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. For those two to have 20 carries total, something's gone horribly wrong. They are the best running back duo in college football. I think we can all confidently say that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been saying Judkins has been the number one running back in the country for 2 years.
Yeah.
And you match him with Travion Henderson, they should run the ball every play. Then you have Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, who are unbelievable. They're an incredible talent. But if Penn State wants to win this game, they're going to send a multitude of blitz packages, giving Will Howard fits. I mean, look, Will Howard's playing in some tough environments now. He's no spring chicken here. This is a guy who's played in some tough environments in the Big 12. He played at Oregon already this year. He knows what he's going against. He knows it's going to be loud, even if it's a 12 o'clock kickoff, which you said it for me earlier, is a national crime.
Yeah.
This is a 12 o'clock kickoff. This by far should be game day, which it is. It should be a 8 o'clock kickoff on ESPN, ABC, CBS, whatever you want to put it on, Fox. But if Ohio State wants to win this game, they have to establish their run game first. Overall, they have to run the ball. I know they're without their tackles. I get that. You have to establish a run game though, because if you're one dimensional, Penn State will ruin you all night long.
Yeah,
James Franklin's been in college football for too long. He's lost this game too many times now. This is a team he has the upper hand finally in this game. with a good team, with Ohio State kind of they have the guys, they haven't put it together yet. You have a chance to knock them off. You have a chance to knock them really out of the playoffs. Not completely, but still a chance to knock them out of the playoffs and get that big win under your belt that you haven't really had since you've been there.
Yeah, no, and to your point, Ralph, with that, I wanted to go back because I wanted to play the odds game here. If Penn State wins this game, they have Washington and Minnesota coming up. You do get Washington at home, which is big in terms of the fact you don't have to go back across the country.
They'll find a way to lose the Minnesota game, though.
You think they're going to lose Minnesota?
They'll find a way.
So let's say they do, and they don't make the conference title game. Well, Ralph, they still have over a 99% chance to make the playoffs. So I don't want to say you pencil it in. I don't want to write it in Sharpie here, but if you win this game, if you're Penn State, you can pull out the hole puncher like the guy on the Polar Express, worst Christmas movie ever, and you can say tickets, and you can go punch that ticket. All right, real quick, I wanted to get to this kind of last point because you mentioned this, the environment and everything. A game like this is determined right within the margins. I think this is not going to be a blowout. I could see this being a low-scoring, physical football game. And, Ralph, what I just described should be happening at 8 o'clock at night, not at noon. But when you go back and look at how Ohio State handled Autzen Stadium when they played against Oregon, 4 false starts and 1 delay of game. We have seen offensive miscues, self-inflicted mistakes. I've seen it in person. We've seen that ruin you. We've seen that just tear apart any momentum. That's my cause for concern here for Ohio State. I like Will Howard. I like what they have, but even though it's going to be a noon kickoff, that place is going to be rocking. Can they handle the environment? And I'll go ahead and give you my pick here. I'm riding with Penn State to win this one. Close. I think that this Nittany Lion team is going to be better within the margins in the little details than Ohio State will be, and that's going to be the big difference.
I agree. I think you're right about low scoring. This to be a high scoring shootout would shock me. But then again, if it did happen, I shouldn't be shocked because I'm wrong 90% of the time. I see it being 21-20. I mean, I really do. I think 21-20 Penn State. And I think it's a first half. Like if you remember last year, this game, I think the first half was like 7-3. It was a horrible, ugly game from both teams.
Yeah.
And Ohio State ended up just putting I think they scored 14 in the second half, and Penn State scored 3. It was like whatever it was like 21-6 was the final score, something on the lines of that last year.
Yeah,
I have it being somewhat like that. Just an ugly game, like you said. There are gonna be turnovers. If Drew Aller doesn't play, I might switch it to Ohio State though. Yeah. But when I say Trace McSorley Jr., I do mean that. He is the same exact size and wears the same number as Trace McSorley.
Yeah, no, he's good. I mean, he's a good player. It's just throwing him in that environment, and I know you're at home, and just that situation is a lot to ask of that.
That truly does help him being at home in that situation.